I was supposed to make John believe that he was going to teach me, that I'm there. I'm supposed to learn from you. You know, I was supposed to even tell John, you know, my dad says to pay attention to what you're saying, not what my uncle's saying. Try to win him over. You know, he's going to help me groom me for this. And basically the ruse was that we were going to put dynamite by a dentist's office building to scare him into paying extortion money. That was the whole play there. Okay, and then John was going to be the lookout guy in the driver's seat. My uncle was in the passenger seat with the box on the floor, which only had flares in it, looking like dynamite. I was going to be in the back passenger. I was going to tell John, hey, John, look it over here. You see somebody over there? While John's looking, I was going to pull out my gun, shoot him in the back of the head. My uncle was going to pull out his gun, shoot him. We were going to torch the car, go. But being alone, that's how my uncle got shot. John was very street smart, caught the play. They started fighting in the car, you know, and even John being shot. And you know, my uncle assassinated him in front of a bingo hall, and it was almost kind of direct, almost like exactly out of the scene from Scarface, you know, where he ran out in the street. My uncle ran out in the middle of the street behind him as he was staggering and shoot him in the back of the head.
So now so you remember this whole situation when this happened, right? So after your uncle,
I was in the background. I was to be contacted. I knew what I needed to do if anything went wrong.
Yeah. So what was the situation after your uncle shot himself in the arm and he gets away, drops the glove and all that? Do you remember what happened next? Like, how did he take care of the wound and all that?
Oh yeah.
Did he go to the hospital?
When he got home. He was supposed to be on a radio. Okay, we had radios. My dad and a guy named Johnny Monteleone were driving around the area, and he was supposed to go before he tried to shoot John and say, okay, you know, like the area is clear. You know, we're going to back the truck in and unload it. Now we would say stuff like that in case somebody else was on the radio. Mm-hmm. And uncle didn't, and he reached for the gun. So my dad and the other guy are driving around, and all of a sudden they hear sirens. Everything's going on. Now they're trying to drive around looking for my uncle. Now, my dad and Johnny Monteleone are in work cars. Work cars are what we use that aren't in our name that, you know, you can just get rid of.
Yeah, crash cars. Like crash cars,
same thing. My uncle got, he actually on foot made it all the way to his home, which was about a good 2 miles away. So the way he lost the glove was because it was bleeding, and it was I believe it was September, and he had these black gloves on. So he went to a garden hose in a yard to wash off the blood and take the gloves off. He went to stick it in one of his pockets, and one of them fell out. That's how they found the glove.
Did the bullet go through his arm, or did it stay in there?
A little bit stood in there, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So once my father found out where he was at, a guy named Jimmy Marcello had I'm sorry. He had a veterinarian that we had to take my uncle to. That was who we can use and trust. And then they had hide my uncle in an apartment in Cicero for a few weeks, you know, so his arm would heal as much as possible. And then I went to retrieve the gun that my uncle threw in a catch basin sewer. So that
Did you get it?
I got it, and then we were able to dispose of it properly. So I had to go back days later and get it.
So now, when all this is going on, is Tony Spilotro up in Chicago at this time?
No, Tony Spilotro's in Las Vegas.
At this whole time that this is going on.
Actually, when this happened, Tony Spilotro was already dead.
Oh, he was? Yeah,
this happened after. So one of the reasons that John Ficarata got killed was because prior to, so John Ficarata got killed in September, and Spilotro brothers got killed in June of that same year. And while they were out on surveillance in Vegas, John did a couple of big no-nos, and the bosses were mad at him. So that was one of the many reasons that they wanted John dead.
Yeah. So when they give you a contract like that, do they pay you a bunch of money, or do you just
part of what you're supposed to do? If you're ordered to do something, my uncle and my dad are made members. If they're ordered to do something, they have to do it.
Yeah.
If you start putting up a fight about it, you may be part of that. You know, the party may be for you. You're not going to know it until you're there. And the next thing you know, you're laying next to them.
Yeah. Your lights go out.
Yeah. So there's certain obligations. Yes.
So do you remember them planning the hit on Tony Spilotro and his brother?
Yes. Yes. I remember that. I remember prior to that, months prior to that, them sending out a hit team to Las Vegas for months to surveil Tony and try to get him. And
did you ever go there?
No, no, I was not part of that. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of guys didn't know how deeply involved I was. So the reason I knew a lot of this was because of my dad and my uncle. Yeah. So my dad knew he wasn't supposed to bring me into this life. So he always used to say, "You're my secret weapon." Okay. Yeah. I don't want anybody to know about you. So, you know, that was the thing. But I did know a lot because, you know, it was neat to know. Yeah, my uncle and my dad were very close with Michael Spilotro, especially my dad. Tony, my dad and Tony grew up in the same neighborhood. The families, everybody. I mean, we were all friends, you know.
I don't understand why they didn't just kill them, and why did they have to beat them to death in front of each other?
I couldn't answer that because I wasn't there. But let me get back real quick. So it was very hard for my dad and my uncle when the order came down to kill. So first they were supposed to go out there and get Tony. Now Tony got into this life. Tony was doing a lot of things wrong, allegedly, and Joey Upa wanted him dead. Okay, he was the boss at the time. Part of it was they were all going to prison for the Strawman Act that had to do with Vegas, and they were blaming a lot of it on Tony. Now, whether he had a big piece of it to do, I don't know. I just know that it was very hard for my dad and my uncle. They liked Tony, but they knew this was part of the thing. But when they couldn't get Tony in Vegas and they came back to Chicago and they came up with a new plan, they were killing Tony's brother Michael just to get Tony. That they were trying to justify. Criminal justification is the worst in the world. Well, you know, Michael was bad-mouthing so-and-so one time, and he's working with his brother. Listen, Michael didn't do nothing wrong, okay?
He wasn't even in it, right?
I don't know. I know that my dad had wanted Michael to get involved, and Michael didn't. But then he said then Tony seen Michael's potential, and Michael started getting closer with Tony. So the Spilotros were a very close family. We were the other brother, Dr. Pat. We were very close with. There's pictures of my dad and Dr. Pat. I mean, it really hit home. But the biggest thing that hit home here was that things were changing. The mob is killing a brother, okay, and for no reason at all, just to get the other one. And people are starting to get killed now. Guys are getting paranoid. You don't know who's for you, who's behind you. You know, it got to the point where my dad and my uncle were sitting there like, you know what? We're never going to go to the same place when they call us. Because in this life, if you get whistled in, you have to go. If you don't, it's a death sentence. But, you know, there's little gray areas like, okay, Nick, you go, say I'm sick, you know, because then I'll go, you know, we'll always have an excuse. And if they start really trying to get us both together, we know something's wrong. You know, they actually says in Frankie, if they do get us, they gave me a list of about 12 or 13 guys that they wanted me to go kill and get revenge with.
Wow.
You know, so that's how bad it was.
That was a just in case list he gave you.
That was how bad it was getting. People were getting paranoid. The government's getting stronger. Okay. So the deal with the Spilotros were that they were supposed to, Tony was coming to Chicago under the assumption that he was going to be made captain. Okay. Now, in the Chicago mob, sometimes you might not have a big title like underboss or captain or something like that. Because in the Chicago mob, they didn't open the books often. And so Tony was very, very respected, and he was a high-level guy, but he didn't have that title yet. But
and there was only one family, so there's not a lot of title.
He was around the bosses, but the guy that had that title was a guy that was one of Tony's mentors, okay? The one guy that was close to Tony, Joey Lombardo. So Joey Lombardo's still around. They just don't say, okay, Joey, you don't get the title no more. You're in jail. It goes to Tony. But Tony ran Las Vegas. He reported directly to the bosses. That was a very, very important role that Tony had. Yeah. What I was told was the bosses loved Tony, and Tony was rising fast. You know, that he was going to be one of the guys that would take over the mob one day. But Tony didn't have that captain title yet. And this is only people that inside the mob knew. The only reason I knew was it was my dad and my uncle talking to me and them about it. So the idea was Tony was coming back to finally get that title of captain, and we were going to make his brother a made member of the mob. So now, so it's a making ceremony. So Tony's got to show up. They did show up, okay, but it wasn't what it was supposed to be. And they did. They beat them to death with hands and fists.
I thought it was bats. It was a bats.
No bats. No bats. They beat him and they strangled him with wire or rope, but they literally beat him to death.
Now, did your uncle tell you the story after it all happened? Did he tell you exactly what happened?
Well, yeah, I was sitting with my dad and my uncle, and he was going into detail everything that happened. My dad at the time had surgery, and at first he was down in Florida when all this was going on. So he wasn't asked to be part of it, but he wanted to know what was going on in every update. You know, and my uncle was concerned that day because it's like the military, the mob. You know, they didn't sit down and say, hey, Thursday, meet us over here. We're going to kill this guy. They tell you to be on a corner. You're going to be picked up, and they don't give you much notice. You go out to that corner somewhere. They pick you up, and you don't know where you're going or what's going on until you get there. Okay, and the whole time they're testing you with questions and stuff just to see if you have any doubts or anything like that.
So as all this stuff's going on, are you starting to be like, damn, they're killing these people? I mean, I think I might be next.
I seen my father changing. I seen the streets changing. I seen guys going against one another. I seen people that were family friends getting killed, going to jail. And I'm like, I'd rather work. All my friends are making good, legitimate money. Well, I don't want to do this anymore. My dad wasn't an easy guy to say no to. You know, let me tell you something. I'm no victim here. I'll never tell you I'm a victim. Because when I bought into this life, when you buy into this life, you're always looking how you're going to make the next buck, right? It's the I experimented with powder cocaine. I was like, oh, this ain't bad. I couldn't believe the money was made into it. Knowing in Chicago, if you deal with drugs, it's an automatic death penalty.
Is that the law in Chicago?
Yes. If you're in the mob or anywhere around the mob, affiliated with the mob, a relative of the mob, and you deal with any kind of drugs, it's an automatic death penalty.
Well, are there people in Chicago that are with the outfit? Are there people accepting money from drugs?
Yeah. Well, everybody say, I'm going to tell you, Bill, you come to me, I know I don't get involved with drugs, but if you ever think about loaning out money, I'll tell you what, I don't need to know all the details. Here's $20,000, lend it out, and show me what kind of profit I'm going to make with it. Okay. Now, common sense knows that, 1 or 2% on $20,000, I'm going to get so many dollars, but yet I'm getting way more. I'm getting double my money all the time. I know what you're doing, but you better not tell me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was a lot of people that were doing it. Actually, the Spilotros were doing it too.
Oh, they were involved with drugs too.
He was involved with drugs, with a lot of biker gangs and everything. There was drugs flowing out of the restaurant that Michael had in our neighborhood. Tons of drugs. I knew guys in there. I knew guys working with them. Actually, it's kind of comical because one time my dad said to me, we think that Tony and Michael have something to do with cocaine. Now, I knew because I was dealing in it too, right? So I go, yeah. Dad. He goes, how do you know? I go, I don't know. I'm just agreeing with you. I heard it from the street, So I almost beefed myself off right there. But so in I developed a powder cocaine habit. Okay. And with that habit, it was like my way to escape from this life I had now. I had a wife, I had kids. I was in a very unhappy place.
How old were you at this point?
Oh, this was in my late 20s, and this is when I wanted to start getting away from my dad, 28, 20, 30 years old, 30.
Is this around the time that you took the money?
Yeah. Okay,
so when you go and take that money, what's going through your head? And do you think
That's a good question. What's going through my head was that I want to get away from my dad. Now, I was in business with my dad, rehabbing. I had bought trucks. We were putting them to work. And my dad used to control us. See, my dad was a control freak. Yeah. He felt he had this sickness and sadness that if his kids were successful, they wouldn't love no more. So he controls. Not only did he control me, my brothers, he controlled my uncle, he controlled my mother, he controlled everybody. What's the best way to control somebody? Fear and money.
Yeah.
So he'd hold our money. When I was working, I'd give him my check. He'd say, how much you need? I'm 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. How much money you need out of your check? So I put up money. My dad owed me a couple $100,000 at least, okay? And he, you know, and he'd hold it. He'd have it on notes and stuff like that. So I decide I've had enough. I want to get my kids. I want to get my wife. I'm going to start over. But to start over, you need money.
Yeah.
So what I did was I knew where he had money hidden. I went to one of the hiding spots. There was about $700,000-800,000. I took the money with the intention of taking it to make some money with it and put it back. Yeah. Opened up a couple of restaurants, did my drug trade a little more. Well, my dad wasn't coming around.
Did you think, hold on, did you think he would not find out? Did you think he wouldn't find out?
I didn't even care, okay? You know, I carried a gun every day. It was so bad with me and my dad that I didn't even care.
So were you even talking at that point?
No, I would try to avoid him. I wouldn't go to holiday parties. I'd send my wife and kids. I didn't, you know, and he wasn't really aggressively looking for me. But
how long did it take him to find out the money was gone?
A couple of years.
Couple of years?
Yeah, because it was a hiding place that I didn't go to all the time. Okay.
So he must have had a lot of money stashed around.
He hid money all over. Okay, he probably had $8-10 million hidden, you know, in different hiding places and stuff, and plus money in banks and stuff.
Is there any more hiding spots that we could go check out?
I don't know. But so yeah, my intention. And then after a while, I'm like, you know what? I earned that money. I deserve that money. I'm going to keep it. My dad ain't coming around. He knows that's my money, so I wound up keeping it. You know, and I figured, you know, after a while with the restaurants, eventually I'll get rid of the restaurants and, you know, move my family. And one day my dad showed up at my house and he knew about
Where did you live at this point? Where in Chicago?
Yeah, I still live in Chicago. So Elmwood Park is a suburb of Chicago that had a lot of mobsters. About 50% Italian in that neighborhood.
How come you didn't take the money and just move to California or another state or something?
I wanted to go to Vegas. I went out to Vegas because I grew up making pizzas and invested in pizza places and stuff. I was going to do it. I had everything, and I came back and I didn't. I didn't move. And yeah, I mean, hindsight is always easy to look back. But you know, again, too, I'm still partying with cocaine. So, you know, you're not in 100% right frame of mind. I went to all kind of counseling. It's been, I don't know, since July of 1997, I've been clean. One of the most embarrassing things I ever did in my life. I know I'll never do it again. I'm past that point. But, you know, you think you got a clear mind and you don't, you know, and so
I've been clean since September 14th, 2019.
Okay. So. Yeah, it's big. Believe me, the years will fly after a while, and the way you feel, and you know what you do, and you know, and through counseling and even the FBI people around me, you know, I was never into drugs growing up, but what had happened was that powder cocaine, it took me to a great place where I didn't have to think about my life and what I was doing.
An escape. It was an escape.
Yeah. So I'm glad about that, because my big concern through going through everything was, you know, am I going to relapse? Am I going to want to do it again? Am I going to, you know, and I've never had that urge. So
and then wreck your whole family life and everything you built up to this point. It's just not worth it.
But the biggest thing was the urge. Am I going to have that urge again? And I never had. You know, I've been around where I've seen people start the party, say, hey, you want something? No, I started laughing. There's no fun in it. But for me, deep inside, without explaining it to everybody, was I don't have the urge. For me, it's like looking at, you know, spoiled food with you know, bugs on it. It doesn't.
Yeah, my vice is alcohol, but I don't have the urge anymore. I still think about it, but I don't act on that impulse anymore. Like,
no, I understand that impulse could be hard. I'm lucky because I don't even get the impulse, so I'm very lucky. I found different highs in life that were good for me. And matter of fact, Bill, a lot of stuff I learned from my dad and the street, I use in a positive way now. It really gets me ahead.
So sometimes do you feel bad that that you did the tapes on your dad and stuff? Do you feel bad about it?
So what had happened was my dad couldn't control me no more. Okay, he found out about the money, still couldn't control me. I had
with the money, when he came up to your house, that there was a big incident, right?
Yeah. He threatened to kill me. He threatened that he said it was his boss's money, and I said, "Well, your boss done you wrong. I'll go kill him. We'll call it even." No, he just looked at me. He goes, "No, we can't do that. I just want to get him his money back, and we don't need those problems." So he was lying. Long story short, I got him a lot of that money back. He took over my restaurants. He took my vehicles. I had cash that I gave him. So I got.
Did he say I own you now?
Yeah. So that day he told me, "I own you now. You got to report to me 3 times a day. Your restaurants are mine. Your house is mine. Your family's mine. Your car is mine." And at that point, I thought my life was over. I mean, I really didn't know what to do. I thought about my wife. I thought about my kids. I thought about when my life was spiraling. I didn't know what to do. One morning I wake up, we get arrested. Now me, unconditional love. I'm thinking this may be a change. Me, my brother, my uncle, my dad, like 8, 10 members of the crew, we all get arrested for something that was old, okay, that I told my dad not to get into because the guy was no good. So I'm thinking this is going to do us right. This is going to change my life. This is going to change my dad's life. So I went in prison.
Your brother's perspective on things. Did he want to be in the streets or no?
My brother, no. My dad pulled him in when I was pulling out. My brother didn't want to do any of that. My brother was very successful in a lot of other things. My dad ruined my brother, my younger brother. Okay. Yeah. So, and my brother shouldn't have went to prison. My dad told him, "You got to plead guilty. If you don't plead guilty, they're going to give me 60 years. You're only going to do one of those boot camps for 3 months or something like that." Well, you know what? My brother listened to him. We told him not to. He wound up doing 2 years in prison. He was in a camp for a handful of months, and the warden of the camp said, "I don't like Italians," and shipped him to the MCC downtown. So my brother got out on an I bond, did the majority of his 2-year sentence in a full maximum security prison. That's how my dad pays you back. And this goes on. I mean, we could go for hours, but overall. So when I went to prison, I figured this is going to change my life. And when I get out, and before I went to prison, me and my dad, we hugged it out, because he found out about the drugs eventually, and I told him what's going on, but I say, "Man, we got to work out our differences when we get out. I love you. But
while you're making the tapes?
No, this was before we went to prison. This is when I was before my time. So I said, just do me a favor, Dad. Don't ever try to pull me back into this life. And please, when you're done, you got enough money, get out." And he goes, "Promise me you'll never do drugs again." And I kept that promise to this day, and I will keep him that promise, even though he's dead. We go to prison. While we're in prison, I'm doing great time. I wind up being put in the same prison as my dad. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't mind going to prison, but he's going to manipulate me. He's going to try to do what he was doing before. I know it. But I said to myself, I was locked down in Terre Haute for 16 days in the hole. And that's when I dug down. I said, what are you made of? What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go face my dad. But the biggest thing is, you don't suffer in prison. You know who suffers? Your family members. You know that, Bill. Family members. You don't suffer. It's like the street in prison. So I go in for 8 months. I worked on me and my dad's relationship. And what I did was I used something that he taught me to learn from the FBI. When you want to judge truthfulness in a relationship, every couple of questions, you ask a question, you know the answer, and see if they're going to lie. Every time my dad lied, he was trying to manipulate me. He was trying to bring me back in this life. I was so pissed. Then some guys from New York, Boston, Detroit, and Chicago that were in the life, they start telling my father. So when I got in prison, I got a job in the commissary. Great job. Then I wound up on the warden's board to appropriate funds in the prison with 8 other inmates. So I worked hard, but I had a lot of privileges, which I would pass on to our group of guys in the life. Yeah. So guys are going back to my dad and saying, you know, you should be so proud. Your son's really a stand-up guy, and he's always looking out for us. You got to be proud. You know, he said, what? He says, that's me. That's all me. That's not my son. That's me. They looked at him like they actually their relationship fell apart after that. When I heard that, I was so mad.
Yeah, I think he was like starting to be delusional because all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, he was.